Hey guys, happy Monday. So this week we are going to continue our module all about the Wild West. But today we're going to be moving on from informational text into fiction. It is actually historical fiction. So remember that historical fiction is based on real events in history, but it might have some characters that are made up just to enhance the story. This week we're going to be focusing on how to visualize when you read. You should be able to make a picture in your mind about what you are reading. We're going to review all of the literary elements that authors use to write a story, and we're going to talk about point of view. So, historical fiction. Authors of historical fiction tell the story through the plot. We talked about plot. Plot starts with an exposition, which the characters and the setting are introduced. Then we have our rising action, when we begin to know what problems the character is facing and some events start taking place, leading to our climax, which is the turning point of the story. That's the craziest part of the story, the main part of the story where something big happens. Turning point, where something crazy is happening with the problem, where we can start to see something starting to get solved, is the falling action, where the events are leading up to our resolution, and that is when a problem is solved. So often the plot and conflict are shaped by the story's setting or the time period and location. So this is the Wild West. We're still in that time period in the location of the Wild West. It's going to be about pioneer life back in 1840. It's going to include characters, and they act, think, and speak like real-life people from the past would. It might tell the story of fictional characters in a real setting from the past, which it will today. Authors of historical fiction may use sensory details and figurative language to develop the setting and the characters. So we're going to review our vocabulary. We're going to review the story. We're going to review what it means to visualize, and then you guys are going to get to practice visualizing on your own. So make sure you watch the whole video. Also, I'm going to walk you through how to find your textbook just in case it's giving us problems. It's the easiest thing is just to go straight to class link. So I'm going to show you how to do that now, and we'll start previewing our story of the week. It is called A Pioneer Sampler, The Daily Life of a Pioneer Family in 1840. It was written by Barbara Greenwood and illustrated by Heather Collins. So let's get started. Okay, first things first. It is linked, the story is linked in Google Classroom, but if for some reason that link is giving you issues, the first thing you can do is go to class link, click on textbooks, click on Ed, your friend in learning. I noticed that the link was bringing some of us, the link straight in Google Classroom was bringing some of us to this page here, okay? And it's going to say you have 0 assignments or whatever, because I'm not assigning it in that way. I'm assigning it through Google Classroom. All you have to do when you're here is go to Discover. Make sure it says grade 5 always. And we're still in module 4. So we're going to click module 4, and then we're going to click my book. This week's story is called A Pioneer Sampler, The Daily Life of a Pioneer Family in 1840. We're still talking about the Wild West. And it is a historical fiction. So let's meet the author and illustrator. The author is Barbara Greenwood, and she was born and lives in Toronto, Canada. An award-winning author, she has been writing historical fiction since 9th grade. Barbara appreciates how reading about characters their own age in historical fiction gives young people a personal connection to the past. She realizes that history is full of adventure. Pretty cool. And then Heather Collins loves to paint outdoors in Canada and in Mexico. She has illustrated children's books for more than 20 years. Sometimes with detailed pencil line drawings, Heather has won numerous awards for her art. So those are the people who created this story. These are the critical vocabulary that's going to be important this week. So let's make sure we have an understanding of these words. And as you read your story, make sure you pay attention when you come to a critical vocabulary word. Pay attention to how the word is used and what it means. The first word is the word frolics.
Frolics. Frolics are fun acts, such as dances or parties. All of us enjoy nice frolics in the meadow on a warm spring day.
Okay, frolics are dances or parties. You know, they called it a frolic back in the old timey, in the 1840s. The next word is indispensable.
Indispensable. Something that is indispensable is necessary. The mayor needed to prove that he was indispensable by solving the city's big problems.
The next word is plod.
Plod. To plod is to move heavily and slowly. We watched the horse plod through the snow.
The next word is Proportions.
Proportions. When you talk about the proportions of something, you talk about its size. The proportions of the furniture fit the size of the dollhouse perfectly.
Thresh.
Thresh. To thresh a plant is to beat it in order to separate its grain or seeds from the rest of the plant. Neighbors often helped one another thresh the wheat.
Okay, so we can actually start to talk about visualize in this moment because I honestly had never heard the word thresh before, but when I see this sentence, neighbors often helped one another thresh the wheat, and I learned that thresh means to beat it in order to separate its grain or seeds from the rest of the plant. I can visualize someone with a big old chunk of wheat in their hand, beating it on something to try to separate it. And so I can visualize what thresh means. The next word is stubble.
Stubble. Stubble is the short, stiff stalks of plants that remain in a field after harvesting. After the tractor moved across the field, all that was left of the corn plants were rows of stubble.
Dainty.
Dainty. Something that is dainty is delicate. The bee landed on the dainty petals of the flower.
Oblivious.
Oblivious. If someone is oblivious to something, he or she is unaware of it. He was oblivious to the person behind him.
And last but not least,
Regaled. If you regaled someone, you entertained them. Chen regaled her family with funny stories about her day.
All right, so of course these words are going to be important. You guys know that. We highlight them at the beginning so that when we're reading, we will pay attention to them. Okay, so a pioneer sampler, the daily life of a pioneer family in 1840. What I want you to practice doing as you read is visualizing. So as I read, I will use the illustrations on the page and others to help me visualize or make images in my mind. So let's do that right now. When I look at this illustration of the Robertson family, I see that it is almost like a family photograph. It gives me an idea of how each of the characters looks, how many people are in the family, and about how old the people are. So I'm looking at it. She looks to be a little bit older. There looks to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children. Oh, that might be a child too. So 6 children, a mom and a dad. Maybe this is grandma, Willie, Granny, Sarah, Ma Robertson, Pa Robertson, George, Megan, Tommy, and Lizzie. These details are going to help me visualize the family members as I read on. I'm going to be able to picture their faces as I start to read about them. So let's talk about visualizing. To visualize is when you use your senses to create pictures in your mind as you read. A good reader does this the whole time they're reading, especially with fiction or historical fiction. You want to visualize what the story is about to better understand it. So, you can ask yourself these questions. What do I see in my mind? What would I smell if I was there? What would I hear? What would I taste? And what would I feel? All of your senses can help you create an image in your mind when reading. Where were we? Okay. I'm going to read a little bit of this with you. Of course, you know you can push play audio and listen to the audio of the whole story. I'm not going to read the whole thing on video because I don't want the video to be too long that it's hard to listen to all of it. But I am going to start reading at the beginning and practice visualizing in my head as I read. The Robertsons are a pioneer family living on a backwoods farm in 1840. Although the Robertsons are a fictional family, their struggle to clear the forest, to plant, to harvest, and to make a good life for themselves echoes the efforts of our early settlers, who worked hard to build a home, a community, and a country. The Robertsons, like real settlers, live by this motto: eat it up, wear it out, make it do, or go without. The Robertson children learn early that many hands make light work, and that it's best to make hay while the sun shines. What does this saying, many hands make light work, mean, y'all? Does anybody know? Have you ever heard that saying, many hands make light work? Many hands make light work. Well, that means that when many people work together, the work is easier than just if one or a few people had to do the work. One of the reasons, this is seriously, I believe to be true, one of the reasons they had so many kids and had such big families was that means there's more kids once they get old enough to help them do all of the hard work. Many hands, more hands makes the work a little lighter, a little bit easier. And what about make hay while the sun shines? What does that mean? It means you need to get the work done while conditions are good. Seize an opportunity while you can, because it might not be good weather or a good opportunity to get it done later. Do it while you can. It says, but life isn't all chores and making do. Maple sugar frolics, key word, fun acts such as dances or parties, and harvest suppers, husking bees and barn dances, the birth of lambs and the search for a honey tree brighten the days as the seasons pass from winter to spring, from summer to fall. All right, so this is historical fiction. So although it is fake, it's based on true time in history when the pioneers were alive, and we're going to learn a little bit more about these characters, and it's based on real events, but they're not necessarily real people. So I think I'm going to read Harvesting the Crops with you. And then, well, it's pretty long. I'll start to read it, and then you can listen to the rest on your own through your textbook online. Harvesting the crops. Remember, not only are we visualizing, we're talking about plot, so we're going to make sure to pay attention to who the characters are, what happens to our characters, what they go through throughout the story, and we're going to talk about what point of view the story is written in, and I'll dig into that a little bit more later this week. Harvesting the crops. Stand up properly, Meg said. You can't carry water all hunched over like that. Willie wiggled his shoulders to make the yoke sit more comfortably, then straightened up. The weight of the bucket made the wood bite into the back of his neck. It hurts, he complained. Stop fidgeting. Meg moved the yoke slightly and the pressure eased. You'll be fine. It's a lot easier than lugging a bucket by hand, and you won't lose nearly so much water. Off you go. The men will be dying of thirst. Carrying water out to the hayfield had always been Meg's or George's job. This year, Pa wanted George's help with the harvesting, and Ma had decided that Willie and Sarah were big enough to carry water. Stupid buckets, Willie grumbled to himself as he trudged off. I want to do real work, like George. That reminded him of George sitting at the grindstone last evening, making me turn the handle while he sharpened the sickle. Thinks he's so important just because Pa's letting him help cut the hay this year. The sun beat down from a blue sky. Pa had been right about the weather. Listen to those cicadas sing, he said the night before. We'll have good haying weather tomorrow. If you don't know what a cicada is, you probably do live in here, but it is a bug that makes crazy, crazy noise at night. And this Pa knew that if the cicadas were singing, that means there was going to be good weather tomorrow. So the narrator is now someone in the story, okay? Watching the characters as they talk and do things. The narrator seems like she's right there watching the characters. It helps me imagine I'm watching the characters myself. Okay, now you're going to notice this is actually a story within a story. So one narrator introduces the story. She acknowledges the characters are fictional, and then the second narrator tells the whole story. She is there in the story speaking of it as if they're real present-day events. It says, Willie rested his hands on the bucket handles to keep from swinging and arched his back against the weight. Across the fields he could see Pa and one of the big Simpson boys who'd been hired on for the summer. They swayed back and forth as they swung the long-handled not sure how to say that, to cut the hay. George was bent over using the short-handled sickle to trim around a tree stump. Ever so often, Pa stopped and ran a whetstone over his, I want to know how to say that. Let's do this. cool part about the audio is we can use it to make sure we're saying things correctly.
Willie rested his hands on the bucket handles to keep them from swinging and arched his back against the weight. Across the fields, he could see Pa and one of the big Simpson boys who'd been hired on for the summer. They swayed back and forth as they swung the long-handled scythes to cut the hay.
Scythes to cut the hay. George was bent over using the short-handled sickle to trim around a tree stump. Ever so often, Pa stopped and ran a whetstone over his scythe blade. Willie liked the raspy droop of the whetstone sharpening the blade. There's an onomatopoeia, figurative language, to help us visualize. Okay, I want y'all to read the rest of the story on your own, but as you read, I want to make sure that you pay attention to what's happening with the characters. Okay, pay attention to how you can use your 5 senses to visualize. And after you've read the whole story for this week, and you've thought about your characters, I want you to think about, what does the family effort tell you about how they see the harvest? When they go into harvest, their level of effort, what does that tell you about these pioneers? I want you to think about Willie. Why is Willie looking at the sky? He keeps looking at the sky. And why is the family so worried about the weather? Okay? As you read, practice visualizing. Whenever they talk about, there's on paragraph 21, you're going to see that there's a scene, and I want you to visualize that happening in your head. Because visualizing will help you understand and enjoy the story more. So read this whole story, and then I want you to come back, and I have 2 questions about visualize. I want you to describe the visualization of signs of good weather and signs of bad weather. According to the pages, page 296, it's going to give you some tips. Right here, describe signs of good weather and describe signs of bad weather. And then when you're done, you can turn this in. Let me know if you have any questions.